Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving deep into the historical source material to really understand the intricate and terrifying mechanisms of a dictatorship. We're looking at the rise and fall of Nazism, a regime that brought unprecedented destruction to the world. But to truly grasp the macro-level horror of this era, we actually need to start by zooming in on the micro-level trauma it inflicted.
The source material shares this incredibly haunting story about an 11-year-old German boy named Helmut. The year is 1945. World War II has just ended and Germany is in absolute ruins. Helmut goes to bed one night, but he's kept awake by the hushed, serious voices of his parents in the next room. He actually overhears his father telling his mother that the time has come to eliminate the entire family.
His father, who is a fearful supporter of Hitler, uttered a chilling phrase: "Now they will do to us what we did to the Jews." Terrified, Helmut stayed silent in his bed. The very next day, his father took the family into the woods for a picnic. Shortly after, the father retreated to his office and shot himself. Young Helmut literally watched as his father's uniform was burned in the family fireplace. The psychological scarring from this single event was so profound that for the next 9 years, Helmut refused to eat anything cooked at home. He was entirely consumed by the fear that his own mother would poison him. This wasn't just one boy's trauma, right? It was a psychological fallout of an entire nation that had been led straight into the abyss.
Section 1. The Making of a Dictator. From Art to Extremism.
Okay, let's dive into this and rewind time a bit. When we objectively look at the source material detailing his early life, there's a staggering contrast. Adolf Hitler wasn't born a monster. In fact, as a young boy singing in his church choir, his greatest aspiration was to become a priest. Later on, he desperately wanted to be a painter. These seemingly innocent, quiet ambitions stand in stark, horrifying contrast to the brutal tyrant he would eventually become. So you might be wondering, what exactly broke him?
The source traces this devastating timeline of personal tragedies. It started with the death of his younger brother, Edmunds, which caused young Hitler to become deeply withdrawn. 3 years later, his strict father passed away. But the defining blow came on December 21, 1907, when his beloved mother died. Left entirely orphaned and penniless, he was forced into the streets. Adding insult to his massive grief, he was twice rejected from art school. Homeless and drifting, he found himself in the Mariahilf district of Vienna, which was this buzzing hub of intense German nationalism. He read political newspapers, absorbed the radical energy around him, and eventually, this displaced artist found a new purpose by enlisting in the army for World War I.
Section 2. A Broken Germany. The Aftermath of World War I.
In the trenches of the First World War, Hitler found a sense of belonging. He fought, was injured, and was even decorated with the Iron Cross for his bravery. But when Germany lost the war, he was completely devastated. Sitting in a hospital bed, he refused to accept that the German military had simply been defeated on the battlefield. Instead, he placed the blame squarely on civilian leaders, Marxists, and Jews, cultivating a dangerous stab-in-the-back myth that would lay the foundation for his poisonous ideology. And this brilliantly illustrates just how economically and geographically crippled the newly formed Weimar Republic became after signing the humiliating Treaty of Versailles. They lost 10% of their population, 13% of their territories, a massive 75% of their iron, and 26% of their coal reserves. The Allied powers effectively stripped the nation of its ability to sustain itself.
But it didn't stop at territorial and resource losses. 6.6 billion pounds. To put that staggering number into perspective, that was the impossible war reparation debt forced upon an already broken Germany. The nation was totally bankrupt, devoid of gold reserves, and backed into an economic corner from which there seemed to be no escape.
So what happens when Germany inevitably defaults on these impossible payments? Well, France seizes the coal-rich Ruhr region. In a desperate move, the German government starts printing massive amounts of currency, and this triggers hyperinflation. The source describes a reality where a wheelbarrow full of cash might only buy a single loaf of bread. Money became completely worthless, and just as the United States tried to step in and help stabilize things, the Great Depression hit. American support vanished overnight, leaving 6 million Germans unemployed and roaming the streets. The population was starving, angry, and absolutely desperate for a savior.
Section 3. Seizing Absolute Power. The Fall of Democracy.
Hitler recognized this widespread economic despair as his ultimate opportunity. He'd previously tried, and failed, to seize power by force in 1923, a blunder that landed him in jail, where he wrote his infamous manifesto, Mein Kampf. But now, his strategy shifted. He realized he didn't need to overthrow the government by force. He could use the democratic system against itself, by promising a starving nation a better, stronger future. Now, what's really interesting about this is how visually rapid this radicalization was. Back in 1928, Hitler's Nazi Party was just a fringe group, securing a mere 2.6% of the vote. But fueled by the economic collapse and his highly manipulative speeches, that number absolutely exploded in 1932 to approximately 38 million votes. He became a political juggernaut, leading directly to his appointment as chancellor in January 1933.
So, how do you dismantle a democracy legally? It happens remarkably fast. In February 1933, a mysterious fire burned down the Reichstag, the German parliament. Hitler immediately used this crisis to declare a state of emergency, suspending all civil rights. Then came the fatal blow to democracy, the Enabling Act. This legislation legally banned all other political parties and trade unions. In just a few swift pseudo-legal steps, the democratic Weimar Republic was dead and an absolute dictatorship had taken its place.
Section 4. The Machinery of Hate. Indoctrination a Nation.
With absolute power secured, the regime aggressively and methodically reshaped society around a horrifying concept of racial purity. The source details how this required micro-level brainwashing, starting with the youngest generation. Schools were essentially turned into indoctrination camps. Jewish teachers were fired immediately. Students were forcibly segregated. Textbooks were entirely rewritten to introduce Nazism as a core subject, teaching students to worship Hitler and harbor deep hatred for Jews. Tragically, because the ideology dictated that only the strong should survive, the source notes the chilling reality that physically handicapped children were removed from schools and ultimately sent to gas chambers.
The regime also imposed starkly different, terrifying expectations on children based on gender. Boys were aggressively conditioned to be strong, masculine warriors, preparing for future conquests. Girls, on the other hand, were explicitly taught that equality simply did not exist. Their sole purpose in the eyes of the state was to become mothers, tasked with birthing pure-blood Aryans. Women were actually severely punished by the state for having undesirable children, while being publicly rewarded for producing desirable ones. It was a total, terrifying engineering of human life.
Section 5. The Final Collapse, Overextension, and Downfall.
Let's connect this back to macro events. A regime built entirely on aggression simply couldn't sustain itself. Despite early economic stabilization managed by his economist, Hjalmar Schacht, Hitler ultimately ignored Schacht's warnings that the state's finances weren't stable enough for a massive war. Driven by his ideology, Hitler pursued aggressive territorial expansion just to seize resources, and we can trace this fatal ambition clearly. The invasion of Poland in September 1939 kicked off World War II. While initially successful, Hitler made a catastrophic strategic error fueled by arrogance. In 1941, he turned on his allies and declared war on the Soviet Union. That very same year, the U.S. entered the war following Pearl Harbor. Germany was now trapped in an unwinnable two-front war. Slowly but surely, the Allied forces closed in, which ultimately led to the Red Army reaching Berlin in 1945 and Hitler taking his own life in a bunker.
Which brings us to a final, profound question to reflect on. Millions of lives were lost, and humanity witnessed the unimaginable horrors of the Holocaust. But from the ashes of this catastrophic destruction, the world realized something absolutely crucial. Isolation and punitive treaties only breed more hatred. So, how did the unimaginable destruction fueled by this single regime force the global community to completely rethink diplomacy and create organizations like the United Nations? Well, it serves as a stark reminder that understanding the darkest chapters of our history is the only way we can actively build mechanisms to ensure they're never repeated. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.